What is going on, everybody? My name is Dakota, and welcome back to Cologne. Today, we're going to be looking at and reviewing one of my favorite fragrances, and that is going to be Rabanne's 1 Million ELIXIR. Now, when this came out, it was Paco Rabanne. Since then, they have changed the name over to Rabanne. In my heart, it'll always be Paco Rabanne, but got to go with what the brand is doing. So all right, so we finally have a little bit of break in the heat down here, and it's going to be in the mid 80s, and I can't help myself. I'm going to have to wear one of my favorite fragrances, and this is very much a cold weather style fragrance just because this thing is a lot. But before we get too far, first thing we're going to do is we're going to show off the atomizer. And the atomizer on this one is honestly just okay. It kind of disappoints me that it's only okay. I don't know if there's something kind of stuck in here or what, but it doesn't really have a good burst. It's like it's only shooting from like the top half. But anyway, so now we're going to put two there on the arm. And what you get when this fragrance gets in the air is an absolute beauty of a fragrance. This thing is deep, it's rich, it's very sweet. There's a lot of fruitiness going on in here. It's got a beautiful rose note in here. And when it first gets in the air, you're overwhelmed with a little bit of that sweetness. Now, it is very rich right from the get, but it's very sweet. There's a lot of floral going on in here. And that's kind of what you're hit with when it first gets in the air. But usually within a couple minutes or so, some of that sweet dials back a little bit, and some of the wood notes that's in this start to come out. But it stays very much a very fruity, sweet kind of in the opening for a good while. But as it's drying down a little bit, we're going to go over the notes. So the top notes on this is going to be apple and Divana. And honestly, I don't get much apple off the nose of this. This doesn't really have like that crisp apple kind of nature. The Divana honestly gives it a little bit of a green feel on the top. It kind of helps blend into what gives it a little more of that floral in the opening. The middle notes on this is damask, rose, cedar, and osmanthus. And as I said before, the rose note in this is absolutely a beautiful rose note. And some of that cedar kind of gives it a little bit of that woodier nature that you start to get when it starts to dry down a little bit. And the base of this dries down to a vanilla, a tonka, and a patchouli, which obviously that is what gives it that overwhelming sweetness. Now the tonka and the vanilla in this give it a little bit of a contrast between a youthful and a mature style of richness when it comes to the sweetness on this. And honestly, I absolutely love the way they did the blend on this. It smells very natural. This doesn't smell synthetic at all to me. Some of the one or two of the other 1 millions do smell just a little bit synthetic. All right, as this dries down a little bit and some of the mid notes start to come through, it's going to be that rose and cedar. So as this dries down a little bit, some of the woody notes really start to come through. Some of that rose mixed with some of the Divana helps give this a little more of a florally undertone that stays very sweet. And even though this fragrance doesn't have the biggest change through the dry down, it develops like a lot of depth. There's a lot going on in here, and you can almost pick apart where every note is at in this fragrance. And that's one of the things that I love about it is this fragrance is a little more simple compared to some of the other stuff that has been released by 1 million. But this one to me is the most complete fragrance out of the entire collection. And that includes the newest release that was Million Gold. So now let's dive into the price, performance, and availability of this. So availability wise, this is a Rabanne product. It should be everywhere. This should be in every store. It should be in discounters, stuff like that. Price wise, that's where it gets a little bit tricky. So from retail, this one's about $140 to $150. From discounters, you can pick this up. I think right now the cheapest I was able to find this was $89. I'll have the link in the description. And now we can get into the performance side of this, and that is where this thing absolutely shines. So longevity on my skin, I get 10 to 12 hours on this. This thing is a monster performer on my skin. Now I understand everybody's skin's a little bit different, so that's why I preface on my skin. The sillage on this is a big sillage. I get that 2 to 3 foot sillage, and the projection on this for the concentration that it is very good. This thing is a big projector. So performance wise, this thing is just an absolute beast in my collection. That's part of why I love it so much. But as this starts to dry down and it gets all the way into the deepest parts of the dry down, this gets very sweet. That rose hangs on, the florals in this hang on. It just gets a little bit sweeter, it gets a little bit darker, it gets a little bit richer. I love the makeup of this fragrance. It's very rare you're able to see a floral fragrance mixed with this kind of sweetness smell this good, at least to me anyway. Now, I know other fragrances use floral and sweets and stuff like that, but to me, this one is one of the few that I feel is blended exceptionally well. Another person who really loves this fragrance is my wife. So anytime we have a date night or we do something like that, there's normally 4 or 5 fragrances that I will always reach for that she just absolutely loves. This is one of them. My wife absolutely loves this one. I absolutely love this one. And if I had to give this fragrance a rating right now, it should come as no surprise. I will give this a 10 out of 10. There is literally not a single thing that I would change about this fragrance. I love the performance. I love the profile. I love the way it dries down. I love the opening. Literally nothing I would change about this. Even the way it dries down on my skin, it doesn't leave a lot of that oily residue like some of these stronger concentrated fragrances do. This is one of the few fragrances that I just can't get enough of. And sometimes that kind of sucks because this is a very dominant fall and winter fragrance. This is not a fragrance you could easily wear in the summer due to some of the sweetness, due to some of the richness, due to how loud this fragrance can be. This one is going to be a hard wear in the summer because it's just going to end up kind of stinking a little bit and you're not going to get that performance out of it at all. This thing is a cold weather monster, and that's where I get the majority of my performance from. Is the colder it is, the better this thing's going to do. So we're about 45 minutes into the dry down. So we're about to the point where it's going to be at the deepest part of the dry down. And I am happy to say that even in the deepest part of the dry down, this thing keeps a lot of that sweetness. Some of the wood notes do start to come out a little bit. Some of the rose note starts to fade to the back. It does lose a little bit of the floralness. It still keeps just enough to make it like a background note. It picks up a little bit more of that sweetness. It really turns itself into a very matured sweet with undertones of fruity florals that just smells absolutely amazing. The fruity notes in this, I'm not really sure what gives it that kind of fruity playfulness to it, but it's one of the things I feel like really makes this a more complete fragrance, because you don't really see that based in a lot of heavy hitting fragrances, a lot of that playful fruitness that's done in a mature enough way that also smells very relaxing, that it's not too intense, it's not overpowering. This fragrance kind of hits you very softly, but it's also strong and robust enough to where you don't need to go overboard with it. You don't need to overkill the spraying on it. And it's one that would be an awesome date night fragrance. It's one that could borderline be a signature scent. It's one that you should not be afraid to wear at any given time, because for how deep and rich and kind of thick the smell can be, it also has a little bit of a mass appeal vibe to it. A lot of fragrances that use rose and divana and stuff like that, they're not really considered like mass appealing, because some of that can lead to a bitterness. Some of that can lead to maybe like a sharpness. So for some people that is a little bit of a turnoff, but the way this one was blended, it is put together well enough that it is just a complete fragrance. It's about the best way you can describe it. Is there's no rough edges around this fragrance from the moment you spray it till the moment it finally leaves your skin. It's going to be one of those that is going to be silky smooth. It's going to have a relaxing nature to it. It's going to have a warmth. It's going to be an inviting style of fragrance that's just going to want to make you cuddle up. So if you're someone who likes those sweet, rich vanillas, dark, fruity style fragrances that's got some floral undertones, stuff like that, this will be a fragrance you'll want to have in your collection. I recommend this being in your collection anyway, just because to me, this is a genuine beauty of a fragrance. But I do think that's going to get us close to wrapping up. I'm going to go ahead and try to get in on this bottle just a little bit. The ring light really tends to fight, especially with the 1 millions, because you can kind of see it wiggling there. But thank you to everyone who watches. Thank you to everyone who's subscribing, for sticking around, for staying tuned. I'm kind of switching up the format of the videos just a little bit. Let me know how you feel about that. If you prefer like giving like the fragrances solo shots and going over the presentation a little bit more. Just trying to switch it up, kind of change things up just a little bit. So let me know how y'all feel about that in the comments. But yeah, that is going to get this one wrapped up. As always, thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.